This is going to be an introduction to using drag and drop with H5P. Now I have some that I've already done on video, and then I'm going to do these, and the principles behind the drag and drop are the same principles that are going to be the same in many of the H5P tools. The H5P tools have subscribe to a certain set of rules, same as the LMS subscribes to a certain set of rules. You learn those rules, and getting around in it is not that difficult. So I'll describe some of those as we go through this today, and I'll try to make it a fairly simple tool. I will say that as we're doing these, they all come with a tutorial right above them, and if you click that, you can sort of see the directions they have. I have strong recommendation to follow those tutorials strongly. What I'm going to show you will give you the overall, but the specific kind you're using will have some specific steps in a sequence that you've got to follow, or the H5P won't function properly, or you won't be able to add things later. It's odd that way. So first piece of advice: follow the tutorial that they have in addition to the one that I'm going to be showing you today. However, there's 3 ways to create an H5P. You can use the H5P tool in the resources here that is black, like this here, or you can use the H5P tool that is blue, or you can use a separate tool in general, which is called Lumi, which is a free downloadable tool that you can use to edit these. Now, the Lumi tool will also show you the H5P as you're making it and how it's going to work, because it is a standalone piece of HTML. So if you use Lumi, you'll just come to hit the editor and you'll hit start. If you're using the black version of this, you will just basically be able to open that up. And it will consistently look like this, where it will give you a couple of steps that you have to do after you choose one of these. Now, there are 48 kinds. About 2/3 of these aren't going to be helpful for you at all, and you'll be able to tell at a glance. They have things like the arithmetic quiz, and I think you would know. Collage just shows multiple images. So some of these, there's better ways to do this. However, if you're creating an interactive, then it's often the H5P will be very, very convenient and the fastest way to do something. So I recommend you look through these and just get yourself familiar with those. And I'm going to stick with like fill in the blanks, the drag and drop features like that, and of course the video are where I'm going to start from. Okay, and there, like I said, if you go into each one of these, you can click it, and then you can see at the top they will have a tutorial and they will have an example. So terrific way to get through these, and just make a little list of the ones that you might work for your class if you have especially a very show and tell kind of class like anatomy or something, where you do a lot of pairing discursive symbol sets with images. Okay, so instead of using that, I'm going to use the blue version. And to do this in the blue version, what it's going to do is it's going to take you to the content bank, where it will allow you to start a new one. If you go to the content bank, you can do that yourself. But just so you know, if you wanted to do that here, you just scroll all the way down and you'll just use the content bank. Now, if you already had one you wanted to edit, you do the same thing. You'd come down here, you would hit use the content bank. And from the content bank, I can go to add. And there you go, the same selections you have previously. Okay, so here I can go down here and I want to just do a drag and drop. And what it does is it's going to open up basically the same kind of interface we saw previously, where there's going to be this, you take the first steps and then the second steps on these 2 tabs. That's going to be the same as what we just saw, as well as Lumi, which I'll show you right now. And when you open the application Lumi, that you'll have to have IT download and install on your computer unless you're allowed to do it yourself. And sometimes it doesn't actually, it's such a simple little piece of code, it doesn't even require that IT helps, but if you need help, they certainly will. And then you'll get Lumi when you open it, and I'm going to hit H5P editor. I'm going to have the same kind of interface, and I say I'm going to create a new one. And then once again, I've got the same choices here as I showed you earlier. And I'm just going to work out of this interface, but understand that all 3 of them are very similar. Okay, so let's go to the drag and drop. And now a lot of this is going to be self-evident, so I'm going to go through it fairly rapidly. I'll put in a title here, and then you'll scroll down here. You're just going to go through these top to bottom, left to right, and you'll see that this needs a background image. The reason is, here's what we're going to make. We're going to make a drag and drop that has the skin parts here, and then it's going to fill these little boxes. Now, I had to make a graphic that had this text on here, I got all these images. I went ahead because I could, and I created the little boxes because I know roughly how big I want them to be. So this whole background piece here is a piece of background art, and you're going to need that because that's where everything's going to take place. This background will only be as big as that image is. So the first background, the first image you're going to use is something big like that. And then what will happen is once it's done, you can see how these just sort of drag and drop right into there. So let's go ahead and go back to where we're first setting it up, and we're going to upload this background art for that purpose. Okay, so I'm going to add some background art. I click add, and I go to that where I have that piece of art right there. Okay, now how big do I want this to be? Well, I want this to be sort of large because the fact is I want it to be 16 by 9, but the larger the image itself is, the easier it is to move stuff around on it when you are placing drop zones and whatnot. And I won't get into the background of that, but trust me, you want it to be pretty large, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and make this the same size that image itself is, like this one. If I mouse over that, it's going to tell me that this image is 1443 by 847. That seems like a random number, but all I really care about is that it's 16 by 9. So it's going to fill the screen very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to put that number in here. And then I'm going to scroll down. And this will be true in a lot of these. Now, for the kind of work I do, my students are going to get a certain score, and they'll be able to check this sometimes and not get that score and then try it again. What I want to do is I want to give them feedback that's on a 10-point scale for how they're doing, and that will show up whenever they check their score. That'll show up automatically, and let me show you how that looks. And now I'm showing another H5P that I've just put some answers in there. I hit check, and it tells me I have an A because I have 100%, and that's what's going to show up when you put in that feedback indicator right there. It'll show up here, whatever you happen to put in there. And I'll just show you this essentially in fast motion here as I put in the feedback I would like to give. Okay, so that's set. And now if I try to use this as a template for other H5Ps that I do later, I won't have to put all this in another time. But let's take a look at a couple other things that are fairly important to know. Under behavioral settings, it's important that you take a second and you give this a quick look. First of all, enable retry means that they can have multiple tries. Now, how this works in the gradebook varies, whether they always give the higher score or not. So enable retry just allows them to do it multiple times, especially if you're using this for some kind of formative assessment where you're trying to teach them what they do and don't know. There's another thing that's interesting is if you have a lot of these and maybe you just want to give a single point for people who approach a task and you have a number of these, you can select that, but by default you should have that off. That way you can assign how many points it is worth. I recommend strongly small assignments are worth 5 points or 10 points. Large assignments, quizzes and tests can be 100. But try to use points in a fashion that really lets students know what the stakes are. Okay, apply penalties. Let me explain what a penalty is real fast here. If you set up a drag and drop so that you had, say, 5 things that could be dragged and they could be used multiple times, and you have 5 boxes and those can also be used multiple times, what a student can do would they could pull in all the answers into all of the boxes, and it would necessarily be 100% correct because any way you slice it, that's all the correct answers. Apply penalties is if you have something where you can set up to do that and they drag the wrong answer into a given box, and then they also drag the right answer into a given box, they will get penalized for the wrong answer they did. Now that's pretty obscure, but it's important to know. So I always have that off on the kind of work that I do. And then enable a score explanation. Realistically, it's not crucial that you have to explain what the score is, especially on a small project. Background opacity for draggables. This means that if you're dragging little words down there, you probably want the box to have a certain shape and to be visible. Otherwise, you're just dragging words. So if you want it to be largely transparent, if you put in like a 25, that makes sense. Now, here's another thing that you should know. Drop zone highlighting. When dragging, do the zones all show up with a little dotted square around them so they know where to drag something to? If you created a graphic that already has an outline, you don't need to include that. But then say, when do they highlight drop zones? When dragging, all those will light up. That makes sense, okay? or never means that you've done something else so they see where the drop box is. So that's generally what I do. Show points earned for each answer. You can do that or not. For our purposes, generally it's not important, nor do you necessarily want to have a title showing on that, because you can add your own graphics later. So that's all, those are worth knowing, and you have to set these every time. Text overwrites and translations, you won't have to worry about that at all. Now I have my graphic in here, I have the correct size, and now I'm going to go to the next step, which is task. And here's where you want to look at the tutorial and find out the sequence for doing this, and I'll go through that for you right now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create the drop zones, and this will allow me to add a drop zone. And I know that the first drop zone I'm going to do is going to be one that says it is hair follicle. My drop zone is called hair follicle, but no one will actually see the typing I have it on there. But it's important that I know that, because I'm going to have to match the box I'm making with that particular drop zone. So I'm not going to show the label, because that would give away what the drop zone is. I don't want the drop zone to say what it is. Okay, background opacity, once again, as I said, it's important that we make that something that is less than 100%. I want it to have a general outline to it, but I want them to still be see through it when they pull it over. And then the drop zone can only contain one element. That's correct. This doesn't have a bunch of them. Now, if I had like 3 categories and I had a dozen things people had to pull down, I would want them to be able to accept more than one answer if they were just categorizing. But that isn't what I'm doing here. Enable auto align just means they tend to line up. That makes sense. Okay, so that's all I need now for this particular label, which I have a drop zone, which I've set there. But look what happens. I hit done, and there's the drop zone right there. Now I know this is where that hair follicle goes. I pull this out and I try to get it to line up just so, and I can actually make it bigger or smaller. Right now it's a little too tall, but I can make that smaller. We'll actually make it 37, might be better. Okay, so that's the size I want. I know that's exactly what I want, so watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that. I'm going to copy it right here. Now that means I don't have to create the size every single time. Watch what I can do. I can now paste it. There is one, and I know I now have to rename this guy though, because it's not the hair follicle. So I want to edit that. So I'm going to go to edit, and then I'll put in the correct answer. But because the rest of this is right, all I have to do is change that title so I can recognize that when I'm matching those with the other items here in a little bit. But I have to do all of these. What I can do is I can now paste these. I can put them all where they go. I can go back and label them, or I can just do it like this. I can put them all out there. So I'm just going to put all of those in there, which goes pretty fast, and I can come back through and I can change what they're called. Okay, I have all my drop zones where they need to be, and they're already correctly labeled. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to drag images in here, because that's not what this exercise is. I could make these images and then have them match one image with another, but instead I'm just going to use words, and I'm going to make the words the same size as these little drop zone boxes. I also have to make them align with that, and I'll show you how that works. But first of all, I'm going to make the word that needs to be drug in there, and I'll have to do 10 of these, of course. So I'll do the same way, where I'll make an initial one. And for every one of these that I'm making, I'm going to go ahead and put in the text a certain size, and I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to center it. I'm going to make it a given size so it lines up and it becomes the correct size that'll match that drop zone. And I'm going to tell, this is counterintuitive. I have to say that I select all drop zones. This answer can be put in any of the drop zones, because we want students to be able to put in the wrong zone or the correct zone. So understand, this second step where you start making these, each of these that you make, you're going to have to, because I've labeled all my drop zones here, I'm going to have to say that this can be put in any of them. But I have to do all my drop zones before I do any of the specific labels. So now I've made all my labels, and for each of these, they can go in any of the answers, as I indicated. They're all the same size. I did these the same way I did the others, where I had one of these open, I copied it, and then every time I hit paste, I can put another one down. I can go through and I can assign them to where they are, and that they're all going to be much the same. Now, the third step is I have to now assign the drop zone to only accept one of the possible answers. Okay, now this is really important. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the drop zones, and we're going to click each drop zone and say which of these labels matches it. So I've already done that here, so I'm going to click this, and you can see it now says this drop zone can only take hair follicle. I named the drop zone hair follicle, and I call the label hair follicle, so this is a real easy step. But what you'll have to do is every one of these, you'll just click on it, and then you'll come and say, okay, I want that to match that, and you're good. And then you'll come down here, you say done, and then you go to the next one. But the most important thing to remember is that the sequence is you create the drop zones, you create the answers. Each of the answers can go into any of the drop zones. Then you go to the drop zones and you assign them to these. And once you've done that, then you're essentially done. Now, what I haven't shown you in Lumi is that for here, I have to go to File, Save As. It's wise to do this at intervals. It doesn't automatically save in the background at all. And if you're in the black version of the H5P, also crucial, you save the H5P itself, and you also save the entire exercise or you'll lose your work. Okay, let's see how this is working now. Look, all we have to do is we go to View, and there it is. And then we can see, we can put these in here, and they all match basically. Okay, so this is it, and now I can check it. Oh, and I got 0 out of 10. I'd hit retry, everything goes back, and you get the points. That's what there is to making a drag and drop. Now, the thing is, this is now an H5P piece of code that still isn't in your course because we're making it in Lumi, and I have to save this somewhere on my computer and upload it to the content bank, because the content bank is where your blue H5P is going to find things. So I'll show you those steps real fast, then we'll be done. So this is saved, and I know where it's saved. Now I'm at the course where I want to have it in the content bank so I can use it. And this is just another step that you have to do. If you're building it in the blue version already, it'll automatically be in the content bank. But here, if I pull up content bank, I'll see all the things I have for this particular class. Okay, great. And now I want to upload something to this. And I will just drag that right in there. And I know this is the one I need. I'll drag that in there and drop it. Now this H5P code is in the content bank, and I can put it into any of the exercises that'll allow me to put H5P into it. So I can hit Save Changes. That's what I had, and I can now put that in another exercise here. I'll show you how to do that, and we'll be done. I go back to the course itself at the very bottom of this, so I can show it to the faculty tomorrow as a blue H5P. And the way this works like anything else you tend to upload, except you want to choose content bank. So I'm going to go ahead and title this. All right, so I've got that in there. I don't have to put in a description. I know what that is, and then I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to click this icon right here. And this will allow me to upload things from the content bank. And you'll see the same breakout that we usually see. We can upload it from any of these other places, but really I want to just use a content bank specifically. So I've got this, and then that's the one I want. A single click there, and there it is. I don't want to make a copy of it. I want to use the version in the content bank. So if I use it somewhere else in the course, I can go through and make alterations, and all of those will be updated. Okay, so let's select this file. And now on this side, it's really important. I've got to take just a second. H5P, I would like to allow a download, so maybe I can download this. Otherwise, it won't matter much. I do, however, want to put in the grade that's possible for this. And I'm going to advertise that this is worth 10 points. So whatever combination of answers there are, it's going to add up to a 10 on this entirely. And it turns out I have 10 items, so it's 1 point per thing. I put it in a category that named, if I had a category, and this in the LMS resource guide, I don't have categories yet. And you'll see there is no completion items here. For some of these H5Ps there are, for some there are not. For this, there's not a completion. Just be conscious of that, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save and return to course. And there it is. Let's take a look, see if it's working. And sure enough, there it is, and it is functional. So that's what there is to doing this. Now, once you've done this, and you have it set up appropriately here, and it's using the score, then you're going to want to have a student take it, or you're going to log in as a fake student, which I can show you how to do, and make sure that it's populating the gradebook. So that's all there is to that. I appreciate your patience, and have a nice day.